Today's podcast with Bradley Weiss is proudly brought to you by the OMNi-BiOTiC Klartext Triathlon 2024. The OMNi-BiOTiC Apfeland Triathlon has become a fixture on the racing calendar in the last 3 years, and now triathlon is finally back in Graz. Join us on the 25th of August 2024 in the vibrant city of Graz, Austria, for a triathlon like no other. Dive into the Mur River, conquer 90 scenic bike kilometers through vineyards, and tackle a thrilling city center half marathon. With top athletes like Andy Trites, Maurice Clavel, Svenja Tös, and more in the mix, this event is designed by athletes for athletes. Expect fair registration fees, a fantastic event venue, exclusive participant perks, and an epic after-race party. For our listeners, there is a special treat. Don't miss the opportunity to start both middle-distance races in the Apfeland and in the Graz Triathlon for a total price of only €300. But hurry, there are only a few spots left. Furthermore, optimize your race preparation with a 20% discount on Omni Power Race Nutrition using code Klartext20. You can find our online shop at omni-power.com. You will also find all the information in the show notes. So don't miss the OMNi-BiOTiC Graz Triathlon 2024, the ultimate athletic challenge and an unforgettable experience. And now, enjoy listening to the podcast with Bradley Weiss.
Hi and welcome back on Klartext Triathlon. This is our third international podcast and we have a very special guest from South Africa today. Welcome, Bradley Weiss on the pod. How are you doing today?
Hey, thank you very much for having me. Doing very well, thank you. Back in South Africa after a pretty long block in Europe of racing and a busy season. But yeah, thank you very much for having me on and look forward to chatting a little bit about triathlon.
Yeah, perfect. So also the reason why we picked you is because you have raced cross triathlon or XTERRA races for a very long time, but also made a very successful transition into road triathlon. So that's also going to be one of the main focuses of this podcast today. But let's start right from the beginning. You were born 1989 in Somerset West in beautiful South Africa. And at first, it appeared to me that you didn't really find your way into triathlon. So how did it all start off?
Yeah, so grew up in South Africa, and the more traditional sports of rugby and cricket kind of dominates the sporting arena within South Africa, especially amongst the junior athletes. It's definitely changing. If I look now at schools, there's a much bigger focus on mountain biking, on track and field, on cross-country running and things like that, which I wish I had got into a bit sooner, because clearly it's probably what I'm way more suited to physiologically. But having a balanced childhood, I think, is also important, and not getting too specific in any one individual sport, and having a bit of a balanced sporting life growing up, and being exposed to different things is also helpful for future development. So yeah, I predominantly played rugby growing up. That was sort of my main sport, and as I got into high school, spent a lot more time in the gym just to get stronger. As I think some people who follow triathlon will know, I'm not the biggest of guys, and at the moment, I think I raced Nice at about 59 kilograms, which is far too small for a rugby player. So at the time of like the peak sort of rugby playing days, I think I was around 80 kilograms. And most of that was thanks to just spending a lot of time in the gym, doing a lot of workouts to try and put on a bit of muscle mass. So very much not anything to do with endurance sport. And yeah, I came across endurance sport while I was in university. And I'd played rugby for so long that I'd kind of like exhausted that avenue and was looking for something new, and managed to stumble across triathlon. And as we all know, it's just an incredibly addictive sport, and has an amazing community that surrounds it that really like drew me in very quickly. And because I was naturally like quite athletic growing up, I wanted to find an outlet for my sporting competitiveness, and triathlon just seemed to be the perfect way. But my body type was definitely not suited to triathlon at that stage, and it took a few years to start figuring it out. But yeah, I'm very grateful that I managed to find the sport of triathlon.
Yeah, but a lot of what I've experienced is that your strength is really like the basement for anything else. So I don't think it was too bad, like that you had a lot of to build on. Like also injury wise, I think it might have helped quite a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
So I've heard like also rugby of you obviously were running quite a bit. But how did you get into biking and especially swimming as it has increasingly become important?
Yeah, I did absolutely no swimming growing up, so that was definitely the biggest challenge. I had no swim background. Obviously, I could swim. Like, I mean, I wouldn't drown if I got into a swimming pool, but my father entered myself and my brothers into the Western Province Triathlon Championships, just as like, not a joke, but as like something for us to go and do as a family. And on the day of the race, it was literally the first time that we were doing all three sports in one go. Like the week of the race, I think we went for a 5K run, and we realized how far 5Ks is even. And as you say, like I was definitely running, playing rugby, but it was very sprint focused, very high explosive type of sport. And then spending a lot of time in the gym just building strength. So when you start doing endurance sports, it definitely took a while for my body to adapt. But at the same time, it was like just a really cool challenge of something new. And I even remember the one day I was sitting in the gym, and our gym in South Africa that I was using, we had like a view over the local school fields, and there was a running squad busy doing a track interval set. And I just watched them, and I was like, man, it would be really cool to just see like how fast I could run a 5K at some point in my life. So I think there was always that like natural tendency to maybe get into endurance sport at some stage. And when we went and did this triathlon with my brothers and my father, I managed to beat them for whatever reason. And that was enough motivation to sort of ignite that competitiveness within me. And at the same time, the triathlon community was just very welcoming and supportive, and you know, there was lots of advice on offer from other athletes, and I went online and sort of found the next few races within my region, and Googled literally triathlon training program, and a lot of different stuff came up at the time, but I never actually invested in a coach originally. I was just like, oh, there's a lot of low hanging fruit here and easy gains to be made. So yeah, I just started training very basic and simply, and did it for a season, and very quickly the bug bit, and I was fully obsessed quite quickly.
Yeah, it sounds like we're sitting a little bit in the same boat. A lot of intrinsic motivation. That's how I actually started triathlon as well. And funny thing is, I also did my first triathlon in South Africa in Gordons Bay. So I think we're pretty close on that. But I think it was back in 2005. I think you started a little bit later than when was your first race?
Yeah, I think my first race was like 2009 was probably that very first triathlon that I did, but I only got into the sport like professionally around 2012, 2013.
Nice. So yeah, we've heard quite a bit about your background now, but then you didn't get into road triathlon, but you said, okay, I'm gonna try it with cross. So how did that come up?
Yeah, so for the first couple of years, I did age group road triathlon and qualified for the 2011 age group World Championships, which was in Beijing. So that was like my first international trip, and that was over the Olympic distance. So it was non-drafting, and we were on time trial bikes, but that was obviously all road focused. And then we had the XTERRA South African Championships very close to my home in a town called Grabo, which is only about an hour from Stellenbosch, where I live. So I would race that every season. And I mean, growing up in South Africa, we all have mountain bikes. We play in the forest a lot, and you know, it's just kind of a part of your upbringing. So it wasn't that foreign for me to get on a mountain bike, and the fact that I was doing triathlon already, XTERRA just kind of naturally came across my my sort of radar. And at the time, Conrad Stoltz and Dan Hugo were sort of leading the sport, and were very much like icons of the sport for me, and had very much like paved the way for South African triathlon internationally. And it just looked amazing, and I couldn't believe this lifestyle that they were living, flying all over the world, you know, ending in in Maui and Hawaii every year, and it just looked like too good to be true. So like I just wanted to be a part of it some way. So I would race XTERRA South Africa each season, and then Dan actually got a pretty bad cycling injury. He crashed into a dog in the US and had about a I can't remember exactly now, but it was a 2 or 3 month recovery process. And on his way back, him and I met in Stellenbosch, and we became friends and started training together. And he was very much focused on XTERRA, and I just naturally followed his path. And I really enjoyed the sport of XTERRA, coming from no triathlon background, specifically no swimming background. I really struggled on the swimming side of things, and XTERRA is very forgiving in that you can have a pretty weak swim comparatively, but you can make your way through the field on the bike if you're a strong mountain biker, and still have a strong finishing position. So I used XTERRA for the first few years just to kind of find my feet within triathlon. And yeah, I've spent the next sort of 6 years traveling and racing with Dan, which was really special time, and something I look back on very fondly.
Yeah, nice. And I guess South Africa is generally pretty well known for mountain biking. I don't know if you've also raced the Cape Epic so far, or if it's still on your bucket list.
I haven't made it yet, but good friend Sebastian Keenley is convinced that we'll ride it together at some point. So
so he will still do at least Cape Epic after his retirement.
No, yeah, maybe he'll lose motivation, but that was the talk at one point. But yeah,
then let me know. I would definitely be in as well.
Yeah, every year, because it's such a big event on the South African calendar, there's always like entries that become available last minute because partners get injured or get sick or whatever the case may be, and then I get these last minute offers to go ride, and oh man, every season I'm so tempted to do it, but I haven't done it yet. Especially now with my focus being road racing, it's difficult to justify spending a week on the mountain bike. And Sebi and Ben Hoffman did it the 1 year, and I think they both had terrible seasons after that. So it can really destroy a triathlon season quite quickly. But at the same time, I think I'll definitely do it at some stage. I just don't know when.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so I found out that you really got into things in 2012. You became ITU Cross Triathlon World Champion in the States under 23. So were you already professional back then, or when did you really start to do it professionally?
So I did my first professional race in 2012. I think it was 2012. 2011, I was still racing as an age group on the road, and then 2012, I started racing as a professional in XTERRA racing. And the barriers to entry is quite low. You just basically sign yourself up as an elite, and then you have access to prize money and things like that. And the local XTERRA scene was very strong at the time, so it was quite difficult to even make it into the top 10. I think that first year that I raced, Richard Murray won, Conrad was second, and Dan was third, something like that. And yeah, it was very highly competitive, and unfortunately, it's actually lost a little bit of competitiveness over the last 2 years. But I was, thankfully good enough to kind of take over the role or take over the mantle from Conrad, and managed to add another couple world titles for the South Africans. Before transitioning across to road racing. But yeah, my first full professional season was 2013.
Okay, yeah, nice to know. So I've heard it quite a few times that you don't need an elite license to race XTERRA, but I kind of wonder about the testing. Do you think like XTERRA should do testing itself, or do you think like all elite athletes should have like a professional license from the federation? Because I think as XTERRA is evolving now, also with the World Cup and becoming more competitive, it should be something to be considered.
Yeah, I think XTERRA has definitely got into a place now where that should be the route forward. And in order to enter a professional race, you should need an elite license from your federation. And that's one, just to govern the sport from an anti-doping side of things, that each federation, once you are signed up as an elite athlete with a federation, they will then take over the anti-doping side of things, and then XTERRA themselves can also step in and test a little bit more on their side. But I think XTERRA went through a difficult time in that it was still very much a developing sport, and there wasn't that like critical mass of athletes, which they now seem to have. That, you know, I don't think events are struggling to fill a pro field anymore. So it's definitely the next step. The problem is a lot of federations don't understand or fully comprehend what off-road or cross triathlon entails. So it's difficult for them to justify giving an elite license or not. And there's costs involved that the federation has to pick up in order to include that athlete within their elite program. So that's a little bit of XTERRA's responsibility to communicate that with the federations and to work alongside World Triathlon to try and have a little bit more of a streamlined setup like we do in Ironman. I do believe that you need an elite license to race World Championships. So XTERRA do require that, but I think that's the only race of the season that you need an elite license to take part.
Yeah. So what I've also heard is that works very different from nation to nation. So in Germany, you pretty much just pay $300 and then you're like an elite athlete.
Yeah.
But I also think that's a bit too odd. So in my eyes, you sort of need some qualification criteria to become a professional. So and I think in South Africa, it's more road focused, isn't it? That they have a program for road guys, but not really for off-road racing.
Yeah, similarly in South Africa, you just pay a once-off fee at the beginning of the year or the beginning of each season, and it's a 12-month elite license that you have. And I had to actually get them to change the wording in it to include off-road triathlon as part of my sort of racing calendar in order to race like ITU Cross Triathlon World Championships, which I did for a couple of years, and then as well as the XTERRA World Championships. But obviously recently, like shifting pretty much in 2019, I completely shifted to road racing, mostly financially driven. Like I think if you took finances out of it, I probably prefer XTERRA, and it's a little bit more fun, and I enjoy traveling to like exotic places around the world, which I probably would never have gone to. And I really enjoy like the race week of going to a course, practicing the mountain bike loop, making sure you got the right tire selection, equipment choices, practicing race lines, and trying to find the fastest possible way. And road triathlon doesn't really have any of that. It's a lot more like clean cut and clinical, and it's more just a pure physiological test of who's the strongest athlete. Of course, there are race dynamics that come into it, but I do like that side of it, that in XTERRA, potentially not the strongest athletes always wins, but the most well-prepared can sometimes win.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, and I can really go according to what you said. I also enjoy cross racing a lot more over road triathlon. So you said it was mostly a financial aspect that you switched to road because you have obviously won the XTERRA World Championships twice, which is a pretty big deal actually in 2017 and 2019, and I think your first road race was in 2018, if I'm right.
Yeah, so obviously XTERRA was my main form of income, and the XTERRA prize money I don't think has changed since like 2000, back in 2001 when Conrad Stoltz started racing on mostly the American circuit at the time. I think a win for one of those races was about $3,000, and to this day, winning any of the European races, I think, is still around that €3,000 mark, and all the other costs around it, around traveling to these events and preparing for the events, are 5 times more expensive. So, unfortunately, XTERRA just fell behind a little bit from an earnings perspective, and not only that, but just exposure for sponsors and opportunities with sponsorships. Once I started racing on the road, as you say, I sort of dabbled in it 2018, 2019. But then after winning my second XTERRA World title, I wanted to try and test myself on the road to see if there was potential there. And the potential earnings, especially now with the addition of the PTO, you can't really compare it. I got like 12th in a PTO race and I earned $25,000 or something. to win XTERRA World Champs is $20,000. So, it's very difficult to justify, especially if you have the option to race either one. Financially, you're never going to be able to compete against the road triathlon side of things. And very well established, brands like Ironman and Challenge have got events that have got really big prize purses attached to them, which is obviously, we need to raise a family and put food on the table in the end of the day. And but it's not only driven by that. I think all of us within XTERRA still follow road triathlon and are interested and curious about it. And there's been a few guys who have attempted to cross over, some more successfully than others. So I was just somewhat fortunate that I could run a good marathon, and I think physiologically I was quite well suited to long course triathlon. It took me a few years to learn the time trialing side of it, and again, like all the equipment plays a big role in what we do. But the biggest question mark was always my swim and whether I could get the swim to a point that I could be competitive, because it makes a massive influence in road racing, whether you are in that front pack or not, and it can have a pretty big effect on the result of a race.
Yeah, so that's one big point I want to hang on a bit later. But first, how did you manage to transition really from cross triathlon to road triathlon? Have you done training on the road before you fully transitioned? Or you didn't really fully transition. You also still do cross triathlon, but riding on a time trial bike is definitely a big challenge and makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think even preparing for XTERRA racing, we do spend a lot of time on the road, and most of us would have road bikes, or some people do experiment in a little bit of road triathlon, so maybe they have a time trial bike but don't spend that much time on it. I think the biggest challenge was XTERRA is a very highly explosive sport, and similar to cross-country mountain biking, it's a very specific type of energy system to perform well in an XTERRA, and Ironman is a lot more sustained, although saying that, it has actually changed a lot over the last few years. It's become, with the increase in prize money, a lot of the ITU athletes have been intrigued by stepping across, and also just the marketing of that PTO distance and the 70.3 distances, I think created a lot of interest from the ITU guys. So they've stepped across and they've just got incredibly strong swims, and they just, they're super fast athletes. So it took me quite a while to transition physiologically across to that distance. But as I said, I was just naturally quite suited to it. I was a little bit small for the time trial, and completely flat courses, and even courses like Kona, where you pretty much on a highway for 180 Ks, is definitely not suited to me. And as soon as the Nice World Championships was announced, I just got really, really excited. And I think the result proved it. There was always going to be a course out there that would suit me. And coming from an XTERRA background, where we have such a big focus on the climbing sections of our races, most of our interval sessions and stuff was done on steep climbs, that as soon as I found out that the Ironman World Champs was going to be on a very hilly course, I got really excited, because I knew that it was finally a course that I could show my strengths as a cyclist and not just be hanging on to big groups trying not to get drafting penalties. Although I somehow managed to get a drafting penalty anyway in the mountains. But that's a story for another day.
So you could definitely say that XTERRA has helped you quite a big time in road triathlon, especially for harder races. And coming back to the swim, because I was also really happy with your swim, or really surprised that you made it out in the front pack. So
yeah, I was also very happy and surprised.
So leading up to that, I think you had a pretty special preparation in Andorra with some pretty famous guys.
Yeah, it was. I've tried for years to sort my swim out, and unfortunately, swimming is just something that it's that 10,000 hour rule that you need to spend a lot of time in the pool, and one day it kind of just clicks, and you go from really struggling to all of a sudden, times that you would really have to work hard for, all of a sudden start coming quite easily. And I think is one of the biggest tricks with swimming is that with cycling and with running, the more effort and force you put into it, the more return you seem to get out of it. But that's just not the case with swimming. It's almost like the more you can relax and feel the water and have like focus on body position and technique and things like that, that results in a faster overall swim. But yeah, I was lucky enough to bump into Jan Frodeno in PTO European Open in Ibiza in April this year. Myself and my wife were on our way to Andorra for a training camp. And Jan lives in Andorra, so we just happened to connect after the race. And I said, I'm coming up to Andorra. And he was at the time mostly just training on his own. So he said, listen, if you're keen to join, you're more than welcome. And him and I both grew up in South Africa and have a little bit of sort of shared heritage there. And yeah, it was just really an opportunity I couldn't pass up. So pretty much once I got to Andorra, started training with Jan, and quickly we tried to sync up as much as we could. We also just like connected personally quite well and had a friendship pretty quickly. And I just saw it as a pretty great opportunity to learn from the best to ever do it. And yeah, he seems to, it was quite funny. Like the first sort of 10 days of training together, we went and did a bit of riding in the mountains, did a few swims, blah, 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 sort of feeling one another out and learning each other. And after the first, I think we went and did like a 5 by 10 minute climbing intervals on the bike. And he quickly realized that I know how to climb a bike quite well. So he said, okay, we can come up with a deal. I'll teach you to swim and you need to teach me how to ride. And he seemed to have held up his end of the deal because I managed to make the front swim pack at IRONMAN World Championships. And I'm not sure if I held up my end of the deal, but I definitely tried.
Well, I think he's a pretty good descender, isn't he?
Oh, man, incredible. No, he gives himself a lot of shit that he's not good in the mountains, but he is really good actually in the mountains, and his descending is some of the best I think I've ever seen. So I was just really privileged and lucky to be able to spend some time with him and train with him pretty much every day from that point onwards. And yeah, back to the swimming thing, like I spent a lot of time just working away and not necessarily doing the wrong stuff, but I think you just need to learn what a triathlon swim really requires and what type of preparation it requires. And I think that's something that Jan does really well, is that the sessions make a lot of sense in preparing for what physically we need to do on race day. And yeah, thankfully it resulted in my best ever swim in Nice. The swim in Nice is obviously in the Mediterranean, and it's a very salty body of water. So that buoyancy seems to really help me as well, which definitely made a difference. And I think even halfway through that swim, because it was like an M shape swim. So we went out, far turnaround, 2 buoys, then back to the shore. We never actually did an Australian exit. We just turned quite close to the shore and then headed out again. And on that turn, I was like, am I still seeing the front like paddle, or like it was a stand-up paddleboarder? I was like, man, I couldn't allow myself to believe that I was still in the front group, because I've almost every race I've done at that stage, you've fallen off and you've lost 20 or 30 seconds. And then once that elastic has snapped, it's kind of gone and it just slowly creeps out. And by the time you get to the end of a 3.8K swim, you're a minute or 90 seconds back. And that's just where I've been for my entire career, specifically with road racing. So to be in that front group was a bit of a surreal experience. And then I remember swimming on the way back to shore and just thinking, just don't fuck this up now. Like, just don't get dropped now. Because at one stage, like Sam Laidlow eventually won the race. He went to the front and he really pushed hard. And I was like, the bubbles in front of me started getting lighter and lighter, and I was like, oh man, I'm going to lose this group like with 500 meters to go. And then luckily somebody, maybe the lead changed over, or Sam decided to back it down a little bit more. But yeah, managed to make my first front pack swim, and it made a very big difference in the race in the end.
Nice. Yeah, I can definitely feel your emotions there. I'm also still dreaming about a front pack swim in a race like that. But I can exactly like feel like the details you just told us, like the bubble's getting lighter and you're thinking, man, I'm gonna lose this, but then still backing it up. So yeah, really nice to see that. And you gotta like say that it also was a non-wetsuit swim, so that's also like a proof that your swim is really up there, because it also makes a big difference.
The problem is now I have to swim front pack every time, because now that's the expectation. Anything less than that is a failure now.
Yeah, I mean the swim changes obviously from race to race, big time too.
Sure.
Like as you also said, like the water makes a big difference if it's salt water or not, and also currents or whatever. So yeah. It was just like an incredibly good swim, and probably like the day of your life in triathlon. So that's why I also understand that you were pretty pissed about this penalty you got on an uphill. Can you take us a little bit into that? Because I also, I've got to know you in Molveno for the first time, and my first impression was really like, okay, man, this is really a chilled guy and really cool person. But when you got this time penalty, this changed a little bit. The emotions we've seen there were pretty outrageous, I guess. But you managed to find your way back into the race again. So take us a little bit into that. Was it like anger that paid off at the end, that you were still finishing in a really strong 7th place, or did it fuck you up in the first place and then it took some while to get back into the race? Just take us into the race in Nice a little bit again.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, it definitely was the best race of my life, and even despite getting the penalty, it still continued to be afterwards. And I think it's the best shape that I've got in for a long distance race for sure. And yeah, really proud of the work that we did leading up to the event, and I'm glad it got to show on race day, because I think a lot of times guys put in a lot of work for these big races, and the body just doesn't quite, you don't nail the taper in, or the nerves get to you or something like that. So yeah, I was really happy that on the day it all came together and felt like surprisingly easy at the front of the race. I'm normally like a minute or 90 seconds back chasing, and it just feels like crazy hard to try and bridge up, especially if you're trying to follow somebody like Magnus, who just has like World Tour power levels, and on the flat races, it's pretty much impossible. And he's become so good at not taking athletes with him. So if you're not like a Sam Laidlow, there's very few others that can follow Magnus. So to be in that front group was like so eye-opening, to just see how easy the race is at the front actually, and you can just tactically race so much smarter at that point.
Well, was Magnus in the front group as well, or did you first have to bridge up?
No, Magnus was in the first chase group, about a minute back out the water, I believe.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, you don't want to be with Magnus right on the bike.
No, and I mean, ironically, that's the wheel that I got my penalty on. I was riding behind Magnus when I eventually got penalized. So Magnus caught us up that long climb, as you say. It was myself, Rudy Von Berg, and Braden Curry who were riding together at the time. And I was riding behind Rudy, what I believe to be 12 meters. And I was there for maybe like 20 minutes of the climb. He was setting a really good tempo, and I was quite happy with it. Sam Laidlow and Clement Mignon were up the road. And they must have been putting in some really impressive power, because they were putting time into us and we weren't riding badly. So I was kind of content to let them go. And, if one of them held onto it, it would be the race of their life and they would win, which is kind of what happened with Sam. And Clement paid for those big efforts, I think, and really struggled towards the back end of the marathon. But well done to them for going after it really aggressively. And I think if I do go back to Nice, I might race it a little bit differently. And if I'm in the same position out the water, go a little bit harder in that first section, because it's actually like almost more XTERRA style racing in the beginning of the Nice course. It's very steep, punchy climbs, which suits smaller guys like myself and Clement. And then once you get to the long, steady climb, if you've built up a bit of a lead, it's really tough for guys to come back across to you. So, and it also thins it out and reduces the risk of getting penalties anymore. So anyway, I was climbing pretty steady behind Rudy, and Magnus caught us about halfway up the climb, and he came past pretty aggressively, obviously trying to drop us, but he didn't manage to do it immediately. And then the gap between Magnus and Rudy started to open up, got to about maybe 100 meters or so, and I could see that Rudy wasn't responding anymore. So I thought, okay, I don't want Magnus to go over the top of the climb on his own because I know he's really strong on the flats. So I'd rather try and go over the top with him. And I put in an effort then to get across. It took me about a minute or two to get across to Magnus's wheel. And actually going past Rudy, I said, come on, let's get on to him, get a good group at the top. I mean, we were at the time, I think we were only about 90 seconds behind the lead of the race. So we were in a really good place. And Rudy came with me. So the two of us rode across to Magnus. And as we got to his wheel, we hit a switchback corner. And with the roads in Europe, the switchbacks are quite steep. So it goes from like a 6 or 7% gradient to like a 10% gradient. And at that time, I think the referee was driving on the motorbike coming up to our group. And he obviously saw us going around the hairpin. And in his mind, I was too close. But I'd been there for like 10 seconds. I hadn't even really got to Magnus yet. I was bridging across. It took, as I say, it took 3 or 4 minutes to get there. And then came around the corner, and immediately the motorbike came up next to me and gave me a blue card. And I'd been riding the exact same distance behind Rudy for the last 30 minutes. And now all of a sudden that same gap wasn't enough. And it's just such a judgment call based on, a referee sitting on the back of a motorbike. And the fact that us as athletes are just completely at the mercy of referees is just not right. And there's no way for us to appeal it. There's no way to review it. The race is just basically ruined with a 5-minute penalty, especially in a world championship race. And the rules are there to govern fairness and to make sure that it's a fair race for all and that no athlete is getting an unfair advantage. And when you're going up a steep gradient with zero drafting, there should be a bit of leniency towards athletes at that point. And the referee even in the briefing, they said they were going to warn us. And the referee should just come to me at that point and say, I think you're a little bit close. Because it's not like I'm riding 1 meter behind him. I was 9 meters instead of, or 10 meters instead of 12 or something. It's just such a judgment call, speculative call and I wasn't trying to get an unfair advantage. I wasn't trying to draft off of Magnus at all. I was just settling into what I believed was 12 meters. And without using race range or the technology that's available, there's no way, how much I, with my eyes, know what 12 meters looks like, especially when you're going slowly up a climb. And in any case, there's no drafting benefit at that speed. So to penalize someone with 5 minutes at that point is just absolute madness.
And it was just like a decision like out of the moment. So, I mean, it's the difference when the referee is right next to you for about 5-10 minutes and see you like drafting constantly. And then they can definitely tell you're trying to get an advantage out of it. But as you said, you were going uphill. It was going around a hairband. So it was also like this one moment where he saw you, and in his mind he was thinking, okay, this guy's too close. And then like 5 minutes is really insane. Like even for a long distance race, it just fucks up your race so badly. So I also don't understand why they don't make those decisions less harming for the athletes. So I'd rather like if they give you a penalty for drafting, then I'd really say like 30 seconds stop and go is definitely enough. And then for some referees, I also think they would give penalties more regularly. Obviously, we need to fix the thing that referees go alongside athletes for a longer time and don't like shoot out these penalties for momentarily things they see. But like 5 minutes is just a huge thing. So how did you deal with the penalty once you get it? Because I can really understand you were really furious about that.
Yeah, my emotions definitely took over for a bit, and in the moment it was just kind of like disbelief because it went from the perfect day to like the most horrific day in my mind. Like I thought my race was kind of over. I didn't know how big the gaps were at that point, but I was like, this is going to take, at the time, I was pretty much like not happy, but I was like, if I can manage to get a top 5 or a top 10, it'll be an amazing day. But once you get a 5-minute penalty in these races, to try and get back into the top 10 is really, really difficult, especially on the flatter races like in Kona. So in my mind, I was like, oh, fuck, that's pretty much the end of my chances. And, in my mind, I was still like, oh, I could podium here. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, there's no ways I get a top 10 all of a sudden. So it's a very different mindset. But I got super furious and I actually attacked and just rode away from the group because I was still like riding very much within myself. I had a lot of gears left, but I was saving it for the back end of the bike because in Nice, after the first long climb, then there's a long plateau, but it's pretty rolling, and then a pretty nice long technical descent, and then you do a second climb of about 20-25 minutes. And my plan was to tack on that climb and to get a gap, and then from there it's still tough, but it's a lot of descending at that point till the end of the bike. So I thought if I could get away, I could maybe come into the bike, pretty much what Rudy von Berg did, and he came in second place on his own. My goal was to actually just ride with Rudy. He was having a great day, and if I could stay with him on the descents, him and I would have come in second and third position with Magnus pretty close behind, and then I would have been running for a podium, and I think that was very much within my abilities. But yeah, once I got the penalty, obviously all of that fell away pretty quickly, and getting to the penalty tent, I thought by the time I start riding again, I'm going to be outside the top 20. But the climb had really split the race into pieces. I was quite surprised how big the gaps were, and it took a long time for anybody to come through, actually. I think Cam Worth was the first one, about 3 minutes back, and then another small group of athletes came past. And once I got going again, I think I was in 11th or 12th position. And the last athlete to pass me was Leon Chevalier. And I knew that Leon is a really strong biker. And obviously at the time he was 5 minutes behind us because he had just come past me when I started riding again. It took me a bit of an effort, like maybe 2 or 3 minutes of really hard riding to catch Leon. But once I got to him, then him and I could work together. So it actually worked out quite nicely that I had some camaraderie, but I was so angry that I rode a little bit too aggressively to start. And I think I kind of cooked myself a little bit there. A smarter plan would have been to just sit with Leon and let him keep working and kind of find my rhythm again. But part of me, because I was almost in the top 10 still, I was like, okay, the day is not over. So it gave me a bit of like a positive reinforcement that I could maybe fight my way back into the top 5, especially if the Magnus and Rudy group rode the climb a little bit easier. I thought there's maybe even a chance I get back to them. And I think we rode that because obviously when I started riding, I was then 5 minutes behind that group. And I got it back to within 3.5, I think, at one stage. So I'd ridden like 90 seconds into Magnus on a flat, which is probably a sign that I was doing something wrong, especially in an Ironman when you still need to run a marathon. So I cooked myself a little bit there, and I paid for it at the end of the bike because Leon eventually dropped me on the climb where I wanted to attack. I started to come undone a little bit. Leon got away from me there. Came into transition with Patrick and I think Greg Barnaby and one other. And I was really struggling at that point, actually. And I thought, I'm going to fade outside of the top 10, but managed to find my running legs and get some nutrition on. And I was just in like really good shape. So I think give myself a chance to cool my body temperature a little bit and find my running legs and get some nutrition on board. And I started running quite nicely again. I think I faded to about 10th or 11th on the run at one point, and then pulled it back on the last lap. I caught like 3 or 4 guys, I think, on the last lap. It's a pretty brutal run course you do 4 laps along the Promenade des Anglais, and it's like just mentally really tough because it's just the same monotonous back and forth that you do the whole time, and you start the run and you can see where the airport is and you run to the airport, and then you turn around and you can see all the way back to like the 5 kilometers that you just run, and you have to do it again, and then you like have to do it essentially 8 times. Mentally it's a pretty tough one, but the support out on course was incredible. And so many familiar faces. I've raced in Nice a few times now, so yeah, it was great to be back there and managed to fight my way back to 7th. So think on the morning of the race, if you had offered me 7th place, I probably would have taken it. But to know that there was something more on the table is definitely frustrating and gives me some motivation to go back.
Yeah, but it definitely shows your passion for the sports, because I think like some other guys would have just maybe even called it a day, like being pretty much in the almost in the lead of the race, and then like 5 minutes is just so much time. And
yeah, it's definitely a rule that needs to be looked at. 5 minutes is too much as like the initial penalty, especially based on a judgment call from a referee. And if we are going to stick with that system, we need to reduce the penalty slightly to maybe, as you say, like a 30-second or 1 minute is your initial penalty, but you take it immediately. So you lose contact with the group. And if you're a strong enough rider, you'll ride back to the group, If you're not a strong enough rider and it was clear that you were drafting off of that group, you'll slowly lose time. You'll never get back. So it's a very easy way to solve a drafting problem. And if a referee believes that an athlete is really struggling to stay with a group and he's pushing the drafting line, if they just give him a 30-second stand down penalty, it'll be immediate that he'll lose contact with the group and he'll never get back.
Yeah, and I also think that because I have the feeling that some referees they struggle to give out 5-minute penalties because, well, they obviously also know that it makes a huge difference. But I think for 30 seconds they would give them out more frequently, and like then hopefully also like one after another, and not like give those penalties like to 10, 15 people simultaneously. But then, because then they obviously will start riding together again, but like one after another, and then as you said, they're isolated and will make the race fair again. So I really can't see the point why they're not changing this. But
they say that they don't want the stand down penalty because they don't want athletes stopped and standing stationary with a race on. But the roads are big enough that you can just stand to the side. It's not that.
Well, if you have a flat tire or like a mechanical problem, you need to stop at the side of the road too. So that is like a ridiculous argument.
It's a stupid argument, but a lot of the rules within Ironman don't make a lot of sense sometimes. So anyway.
Yeah, we've seen that in Kona too. But yeah, it is like it is. Hopefully we get some changes there. And yeah, coming back to your race, it was like as you said, like getting onto the bike again and seeing Leon Chevalier. It must have still been quite a big boost, like despite the penalty. But I also know this guy and how strong he is, and especially in Ironman racing. So yeah, that really shows how insane you rode on the bike, like on the first climb, and how good your swim was. But then also like on the run, I mean, you still had, I think, a top 5 running or top 5 marathon. So after this time penalty and then going hard on the bike again, overcooking a little bit, that's really something to be proud of. And yeah, the Nice marathon definitely is really brutal. Like this out and back, like seeing a straight line forever, and then obviously very little shade or no shade at all. So yeah, very impressive. How did you handle the cooling? Were there enough aid stations, or did you have problems with cooling yourself down at some points? Or
yeah, the aid stations were actually really good. They had I think they knew that it was going to be quite a hot day, and it was. And as you said, there's very limited shade on the run course. So I definitely did feel the heat at one stage, and luckily they had quite a few ice buckets at every aid station, and they had a lot of aid stations as well. I think, can't even remember, but every couple kilometers there was an aid station. And when it's an out and back on the same course, you hit that aid station twice essentially per lap. So they had a really good setup to keep yourself cool. But yeah, I feel like I haven't run the perfect marathon yet, and there's definitely, like, I know that I can run in the 2:30s, and I should be able to. And it feels when I do run at that pace, which is sort of like the 3:35 to 3:40 per kilometer, that I should be able to hold on to that. But I just haven't got my nutrition like perfect yet. It's quite a difficult balancing act of what intensity you start the marathon at, and we're trying to find what that pace is. And always in the beginning, it feels so slow. When you start out, you just kind of want to go, especially because we're racing like the PTO events or 70.3 races where it really is like a maximal effort on the run. And then you drop into an Ironman, and it's a different kind of mindset. So I'm still working on that balance, but I think I'm getting closer. And after, as you say, after that bike where I really did spend a lot of energy, I was still able to run a low 240 marathon, and I think, probably 5th or 6th fastest run of the day, which it just shows that, my running is getting to a place where I can be really competitive. I think Patrick Langer is definitely a step above the rest, and he showed it again on the day, because I started the run with Patrick and he ran up to second. But just to run a 230 marathon is probably a little bit beyond my abilities. Maybe a standalone marathon I could get close, but not in an Ironman. But I think like 235 to 237 is very realistic for me. And if you do that in an Ironman, in a World Championship event, I think you should be very much in the mix for a podium. I mean, Sam Laidlow won the race with a 241 marathon, so you can get there, but it does take a bit of practice and a bit of. I'm going to change a few things with my fueling and see if I can get it right and have a little bit more stable, like energy supply throughout the run. But yeah, it's a fun challenge, and I've enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed the battle of becoming a good marathoner. But probably looking forward to next season, I might refocus a bit on the middle distance and try and work on some speed and efficiency, which will only help my marathon in the end of the day anyway.
Yeah, and talking about like Nice and the bike course, how far do you think the bike course made a difference on the marathon too? Because obviously this weekend we also saw Kona again, and there weren't really like that insane marathons. Maybe except for Anne Haug, really showed us again that she can really run with most of the men even. But like also comparing those two races, in how far would you say like Nice was maybe even much harder on the marathon, or would you say, well, Kona, obviously the bike course is a bit easier, but the climate makes it more difficult? Or
it's interesting. So a lot of people think that way, that the Kona bike course is easier than the Nice bike course, but it's not actually true, because what happens in Nice is that it's just very front loaded, because you do the big climb in the beginning of the bike, then it's pretty flat, or not flat, but it's rolling at the top sort of plateau section. Then you do a second climb of about 20 minutes or so, and then you get to the high point of the course and you just begin the descent. And the descent is difficult. You're still riding, but if you go back and have a look at the power output, for 40 minutes, you're probably averaging under 200 watts or 210 watts or something. So if you compare that to the last 40 minutes in Kona, which is an absolute death march, it's so hot. You generally have a pretty strong headwind at that stage, and you've cooked yourself for like 3 hours, trying to hang with maybe some slightly stronger riders or something. You come off the bike in Kona really, really tired and fatigued, and mentally quite drained as well, where in Nice you have this long descent and you can refuel and almost like restart the races in some way. And if you nail the aid stations on the way back down and get a lot of hydration on board, you actually start the marathon a lot fresher in Nice than you do in Kona. So that sets it up almost for a possibility to run a faster marathon in Nice. Obviously, it depends how you've ridden, and if you have really overbiked in the beginning of the long climb, then you're going to pay for it on the marathon. But if you've paced yourself correctly and then fuel correctly on the way back down, you can actually run a pretty fast time in Nice. So I found it almost easier to run the marathon in Nice. And I think I ran at 242 or 243, something like that. And in Kona, I was 247. So Anna almost beat me with her time. I just would have got over her. So yeah, I prefer Nice. It's definitely a course that suits me better. And watching the ladies this weekend in Kona, I definitely didn't miss it. I prefer sitting on the couch and watching Kona than racing it.
But you're still trying to qualify for Kona next year again?
Yeah, for sure. And it's quite an exciting announcement that Ironman have put together a series for next year. And I mean, we're still trying to work out the logistics, because it's only been a few days since the announcement. And sadly, Ironman South Africa is not on that list, which I'm still not sure why, because it used to be a continental championships. And
weird.
And so they've downgraded it. I think it's just a regional championships now, or maybe even less. And it's not on that world tour of 18 races that the series is made out of. And then they've stacked like 9 races in America, which is just, I don't understand. I mean, it's an American-owned company, I guess, and that's why they're always going to favor the Americans. But the Americans are far from the best athletes in the world. So they may be trying to stimulate the American market a little bit more. But anyway, the cards are dealt. You can only do with it what you want, and I think the PTO will still determine my season next year, and we're waiting for the announcement of the PTO tour, which will hopefully come a little bit later this month. And once we know those dates, I can start to make plans for next season. But that'll be my primary focus, I believe. And then, the way that the Ironman series works, it looks like you'll need to do 3 full Ironman races in the season for it to make sense and to be ranked highly from a point standpoint. And to do 3 full Ironmans plus the full PTO series, plus to get 2 more 70.3s in the season, I think it's going to be a little bit much to do both. Once the PTO tour is announced, we'll be able to have a bit more clarity on it and then make some decisions for the season. But I would definitely love to go back to Kona, and we don't know what the future of the IRONMAN World Championships looks like. And, potentially it's the last time the men will ever race in Kona if they decide to move it away and prefer a destination like Nice or they start roaming. We don't really know the answer to that. So I do think that it was a pretty successful female professional race in Kona. So the powers that be might be quite happy with the current setup and keep it split. I personally would prefer to have the men and women racing in the same location. I think the sport has got a lot of history with that, and splitting it feels a bit weird. Having two Ironman World Championships in different locations with a month separating them. But I'm not in control of those decisions. So just see what Ironman decides. But they have committed to 4 years of the alternating World Championships. So we'll go back to Kona at least one more time.
But would you be in favor that the World Championship is rotating every year, so that different kinds of athletes get a chance here and there? Or would you still say, even though Kona is not maybe fitting your physiology that much than other athletes, but I mean, it's still Kona? Or would you say, it's better that every continent gets a chance and that you have different courses?
Yeah, I would love to see a roaming World Championships. I think it's the fairest option, and for every year, for not every year or every alternating year or however they want to do it. If it's different courses which suits different athletes, a course like Nice definitely favors me, and we saw that in the result. In Kona, I think I would struggle to replicate that same position. So I would never say it's impossible, but it's definitely more challenging. And just to have courses that favor different athletes and their physiology. I mean, some guys will just always struggle in the heat and humidity of Kona. So to have courses that suits different people on different days, maybe less travel for others, it all builds into it. Would be great to see, and I think will be a good addition to the sport. And Kona doesn't have to disappear, but it can always be a race on the calendar on the years maybe that it's not a World Championships. It just drops to a normal, Ironman, whatever. They can just call it Ironman Hawaii and keep it going. But it doesn't have to be the World Championships every year. I personally don't think, but we'll see what they do.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I definitely agree on that. And I was really enjoying watching Nice and seeing other athletes in front. And that I'd even say with your XTERRA background, the bike course might have even suited you better. Or how far would you say your cross background was handy on the bike course in Nice?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously preparing for XTERRA races, we spend a lot of time working on our climbing, and I think the large majority of our interval sessions and stuff is done to try and become the best climber, because that's generally where our races in XTERRA are won and lost. And I think the technical side of things does play a role, but it's not as much of a factor. I mean, Nice, there are some pretty technical descents, and being able to handle your bike in the mountains is obviously important. And coming from the mountain bike, it's relatively, I can descend with most of the top guys. I mean, Rudy von Berg is probably the best descender of our sport, and sometimes I feel a little bit under pressure behind him, but I can definitely keep up. So I think having that foundation is important, and probably a bit of an advantage over some of the other guys who feel a little bit more uncomfortable descending on time trial bikes. But I love it. Just racing on a more mountainous course, some different features. 180 k's is a really long way, so just to have it to break it up with a few climbs and descents and pretty views is it's good in my books, and hopefully they stick to it.
Yeah, nice. That's good to hear because as I mentioned in the beginning of our podcast, I find it's really fascinating how you're able to be like world class in road triathlon and also cross switching over. Well, Molveno then wasn't good for a different reason, but we're gonna get to that soon. But I have two more thoughts. So the first thought is with the new bonus program on Ironman, and also like with the PTO tour, are you even planning to do more XTERRA races next year, or are you just focusing on road now because it's financially maybe more rewarding than XTERRA races?
Yeah, I would still love to keep the XTERRA side of things going, and I mean, I'm always gonna have a mountain bike in my garage. There's no time I'll ever not. So, and where I live in Stellenbosch, the mountain biking is amazing, and at least 1 or 2 rides a week I do on the mountain bike. But of course, it's not the focus of my professional triathlon racing anymore. So I do need to be careful. But in saying that, XTERRA South Africa, I think, has just released their date is in early February sometime. So it's less than an hour drive from my house. So I can quite easily drop into that one and do it. But yeah, I think the the XTERRA World Championships next year will be tough because of Kona's later in the season. So if I am racing Kona, it won't be possible because I'll be in the middle of a pretty big training block for that race. But if the PTO tour takes up maybe a little bit more of the calendar and I decide not to do the full distance, they could open up an opportunity to race XTERRA World Championships again. What I did see this season is that the level of XTERRA has definitely taken a step up, and the guys do take it really seriously and have really pushed the sport into a new dimension since I was racing. In saying that, I still think I could be competitive, but I would need to take a bit more specific preparation for it. And obviously, I raced an Ironman at a World Championship level, which emotionally and physically kind of destroys you. And then 2 weeks later, was in Molveno, not maybe in the best physical and mental state to race World Championships. But I still wanted to roll the dice, and I had a lot of fun, and managed to go play on my mountain bike a little bit in the Dolomites. So it's all good. But I think in order to be competitive there, I would need to specialize in it for at least 3 to 4 weeks leading into the event, and have some time to prepare specifically for that race. Just whether or not there's going to be enough time in the season to do that will probably be a little bit challenging. But yeah, maybe once the season is announced from the PTO and we know the dates, we can make a final decision on that.
So during your season, did you really just focus on training on your TT bike, or did you get out your mountain bike once in a while, or did you just say, okay, let's do Nice, and then we'll do a couple of specific sessions on the mountain bike, and that should be good for Molveno, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, so originally when we left South Africa, I think it was in beginning of May, the idea was to go to Andorra for 6 weeks to prepare for Challenge Roth, and then we were going to come back to Stellenbosch. And yeah, just one thing kind of led to another, and the season changed, and we decided to stay in Andorra, which ended up being for like nearly 5 or 6 months. I think in the end we were in Europe for. So I obviously didn't take a mountain bike with me. So I had to request one from Giant, which I think we eventually got in August. So I didn't have a mountain bike for like 4 months, which was sad. But once I did get my mountain bike, then I rode it a couple times. But then I was in the final preparations for Nice. All of my big interval sessions and longer rides was all done on the TT bike. I think I did 2 rides on the mountain bike in Andorra, but I was also a bit worried, like the mountain biking there is quite rocky and dangerous. So I didn't want to crash. After all the work I'd done for Nice, taking risks on the mountain bike didn't make a lot of sense. So the most riding I did on the mountain bike was the week of Molveno, which, as we saw, was not enough. I mean, in the race, I got up to 4th position, I think I was on the bike, or 5th, something like that. Myself and Jens Emil were descending together, and we were catching a slower athlete right at the bottom of the single track before you kind of come out into the town of Molveno to start the second lap. And the very last corner, I lost my front wheel. Jens took like quite a cheeky line to get around a slower athlete. And I didn't want to lose Jens's wheel at that point because I'd just come down the whole descent with him. And I tried to follow, and my technical skills ran out at that point. And it was really wet and difficult conditions. So, a little bit of survival on those descents, and kind of just trying to get down safely, which unfortunately I was not able to do. And after I crashed, I think we were about a minute down on the lead at that point. And I was slowly starting to feel better. So I think the second lap would have been better than the first lap for me. Just coming from the Ironman, I think I would have, as the race went on, I think I would have got stronger. But still, I probably best case scenario would have been 4th or 5th on the day. I don't think I could have got much higher than that. But I would have been pretty happy with a top 5 in that field.
That's pretty funny. As you said, you were passing a slower athletes on the descent, because I think that was me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was going on a hardtail, so I decided to ride on the hardtail because obviously the ascent made a big difference in Molveno. Yeah. But yeah, with the mud, with the mud section and technical descending, I was losing quite a bit of time. Okay. But we were starting the ascent together, and I think you talked to another South African age group athletes after the race, and you were riding with a power meter, weren't you? Because I also thought like the front guys, they were going insanely strong on the first ascent. Do you remember your power data? Because I was also cooking and wasn't able to follow them, although I prepared pretty well for this race.
Yeah, like I thought obviously I've done a lot of intervals on my mountain bike and on the time trial bikes and stuff. And I thought like if I ride like an average of 330 to 360, that's kind of like 5.5 to 6 watts per kilogram should be enough. And it wasn't enough. I was really surprised. Like, they must have been going. Also, what played into it is the bike that I was riding is quite a bit heavier than theirs. So, maybe if I was on a lighter setup, it would have changed it. Maybe at the same power, I would have been able to stay with them. But yeah, I was riding at about 6 watts per kilogram and getting dropped.
Yeah, that's insane.
Which is just insane. It really is insane. Like those guys, I think people don't give the XTERRA guys credit enough for how strong they are on the mountain bike. And yeah, I thought that I should be able. And then I thought like, okay, maybe they just like really going a bit hard. But Arthur and Felix basically just go full gas, get to the front of the race, and then they just control it from there. So even if I was able to ride with them, if you attacked, I think they still have more gears to respond, which is pretty insane. They must be able to, because I think they would both weigh similar to me, between 60 and 63 kilograms, I would say. So they must be riding at nearly 400 watts quite comfortably, maybe even a bit more. So yeah, super impressive. But yeah, I need to maybe work on my shorter, higher end power, but it doesn't make a lot of sense for an Ironman. So physiologically, it's quite a big challenge to spread yourself across both. And obviously my big focus for the season was Nice, and managed to get into pretty good shape for that one. But I still think the mountain bike specific type of training will really pay off in Ironman, and still having that range of ability can only help you.
Yeah, definitely. And like riding a mountain bike is always a lot of fun too. So I also think it mixes up your training quite nicely, get different inputs. But yeah, I think you got a lot of kudos for racing XTERRA Worlds just 2 weeks after Nice, which was obviously a really hard race. So I don't think a lot of guys would have done that, even like if they raced XTERRA. We've seen like guys like Kienle or also I think who else raced XTERRA Maui
to do both.
Yeah, exactly. So there were some guys who did the double in Hawaii, but how far apart was that? Was it 2 or 3 weeks? I think it was even 3 weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think every year it kind of changed, but it was either 2 or 3 weeks every year.
Yeah, but 2 weeks is pretty dense. So
too tight. It's always going to be tough to respond. To get like to recover first from the Ironman. Like every race I've done has been a slightly different recovery. Sometimes you feel like you bounce back quite quickly initially, and then all of a sudden, like 5 or 6 days later, you really crash again. And then sometimes, you just physically feel really sore for a long time. This time I came around quite quickly and felt really good on the mountain bike the weekend after Ironman Nice. Managed to like do a really good interval session, which gave me a lot of confidence. And I was like, okay, like here we go. This should be good. And running didn't come until the second week. I didn't run at all the first week actually. And that's going to be the biggest problem. Like even if I'd come off the bike with the front guys, they then running like super quick. So I would have been definitely dropped at that point. So I think the only way for me at the moment to beat Arthur and Felix would be to drop them on the bike and to get a gap and then try and hold on the run, because I'm not going to be outrunning those guys anymore.
Yeah, the run was really crazy. And well, I was obviously in the race as well, and then I felt pretty strong on the run, and I still got like 4.5 minutes onto the front runners, and I don't know where they took that much time off me.
Yeah,
but
it's insane how good they are on the technical stuff. Like they run so quickly through that. But it's also in Molveno, it's a lot of flat running. So having the ability to maybe, run like consistently 3-minute Ks, which Arthur and Felix can do, I think definitely gives them the gap and gives them the edge over the other XTERRA athletes.
Yeah, but would you also say that XTERRA has stepped up a lot in terms of professionalism and like the depth of the field and also the strength of the field? How is it compared to your older XTERRA days?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the sport of triathlon in general just continues to improve across all different disciplines, and XTERRA is exactly the same. There's a lot more athletes taking it more seriously, investing in equipment and investing in training correctly for these events, and the addition of the XTERRA series now, the World Tour has definitely taken the sport to another level, and it's great to see. I like to see the sport of XTERRA flourishing, and yeah. I still think I could be competitive if I train specifically for it, but I think the level has definitely taken a step up since the days that I was racing. The last full XTERRA season I did was 2018, and I did do 2019 as well, but then I was kind of dabbling in both, and I could still be obviously competitive. I managed. That was the last XTERRA World title that I won was 2019, and then in 2020, obviously we had COVID, and that kind of derailed my XTERRA. Because the initial plan was to do both, but XTERRA took a bit longer to come back online. Road Triathlon found a way earlier, and then it just made sense for me to make the switch. So I think COVID kind of put an end to my XTERRA career a bit earlier than I wanted to. But at the same time, it gave me an opportunity to just refocus and to be competitive on the road these days. Like you have to be pretty fully committed to it. You're not going to get away with doing multiple disciplines and trying to still be competitive on the mountain bike, but then try and ride a time trial bike against Sam Laidlow. It's not going to work. You need to be pretty specific in the sport you choose. And for now, I really like the challenge of Ironman, and I'm gonna see how far I can take it.
But if the XTERRA World Bonus Program was paying the exact same amount like Ironman or PTO, would you still race XTERRA fully? Or
yeah, for sure.
That's good to hear. So your heart is still beating for cross.
A lot more fun, I think. And yeah. I mean, you can also just race a lot more. And I really enjoy racing, and I love the race week of an XTERRA event where you go out maybe on the Monday before the race and you practice the course and you choose different tire setups and, making equipment decisions before the event. I really enjoy that side of it. And you don't really get that in road racing. You maybe get in your rental car and go and drive the highway that you're about to race on. And that's about it. Go and have a look at the turnaround on the course. I mean, that's what made Nice really exciting is myself and my wife, we went out to Nice after Challenge Roth and went to go and practice the course. And, it almost felt like preparing for an XTERRA race a bit and to go and get a bit of course knowledge. And I hope that more races like that come up on the calendar for road racing, where it does make it a little bit more challenging and exciting. And especially in Europe, there's a lot of opportunity to make the courses a lot more exciting. So it's unfortunately just difficult to send an Ironman race where they're worrying about, thousands of age groupers. You cannot send them on technical courses. So I think the PTOs may be where they're going to step in and make some more dynamic and exciting courses.
But that's an additional reason to maybe also have pro only races for Ironman, so they can also choose more difficult courses, because we're professionals. We should be able to ride those courses, and that would also be quite a cool thing. Yeah, and also because you said you practice knees quite a bit. I don't think it because Lucy Charles, I think she did all her preparation for Kona pretty much indoors, and I don't think that would have been possible for Nice, would it?
No ways. Being based in Andorra and riding mountain passes every day, that's the only way you can get back and forth from home. It makes a big difference, and on a course like Nice, where you need to be able to handle your bike, it definitely showed who can ride their bikes well. And athletes who maybe are not as good technically definitely pay for it on courses like that. So it's just nice to favor different riding abilities and to show maybe a different style of athlete on a course like Nice.
Yeah, that also shows why we didn't see Lionel Sanders in Nice, because I don't think he would have excelled on a bike course like that. Although he's a very strong athlete, but he's not that good at descending, from what I've heard.
No.
But yeah, thanks for that. But bridging back to XTERRA, just got two more quick thoughts on your experiences, and on what you think about especially the new format, like the short track, because I don't think you went full send into the short track race, because obviously the race on Saturday was much more important. But what do you think about implementing those new formats? You think it might even get XTERRA to a point where you think about getting it to the Olympics, or what were your impressions about that?
Yeah, obviously in Molveno, I was saving all of my bullets for the main race, which didn't end up being necessary, I guess. But I think even if I had gone all out in the short track, I would have maybe struggled, because the intensity of those races is so much higher. But yeah, I think it's really exciting for XTERRA to have the addition of the short track. It does make it a little bit complicated for the athletes to balance, because obviously there's points awarded, and they needed to decide where they're going to put their effort. But it looks like a lot of the athletes that are focusing on the XTERRA series have found a way to balance the week, and race well across both disciplines. And similar in cross-country mountain biking, a lot of those athletes have found a way to race very competitively in the short track race and still perform in the main race over the weekend. And from a spectator point of view, I think it's important for XTERRA to develop that side of it. I would still love to see XTERRA try and film the main race in a slightly better way. And I went back and watched Molveno, not the full race, but try to follow it a bit. And they've definitely made some big improvements. So that's also great to see. Back in the days when I was racing Maui, spectators missed pretty much the entire race. There's so much action out on course, and they just weren't able to film it. So it seems like XTERRA are making big efforts to capture the actual race a lot better these days, which is great to see. And yeah, I think XTERRA, the short track, is a great addition to the series. And yeah,
if XTERRA or cross triathlon became Olympic one day, would you give it another shot? Or
I'm 34 now, so I think I need to pick my battles to see how I'll end my career. But yeah, maybe if it did sneak in there, it would definitely cross my mind to to roll the dice one more time.
Oh, that's cool to hear. And so closing Molveno, just one final thought, because you obviously crashed and it ruined your race quite badly. How bad was the crash? Where were you? Was it damage to your material or also to your body, or what did you cause to quit the race?
Yeah, initially I didn't actually think it was such a bad crash. And yeah, potentially you even saw the crash. I didn't realize that I was next to you, but
yeah, I was looking at you and thinking, okay, does he need assistance, or is he screwed really badly? But
yeah,
you look kind of fine to me, and looked like you were just
back up quite quickly. Yeah, and so Jens changed his line coming around you quite quickly, and I decided, okay, I don't want to lose this wheel, so I'm going to follow. But I maybe decided like 3 seconds later, and then I was too late, and I changed lines quite aggressively, and then just lost the front wheel. But we were going quite slowly at the time because we were coming around a corner. But it was like into a very steep rocky section, and I fell onto the right side of my body, but more onto like my back. So the first impact was on my back, on my ribs. But, when you crash in mountain biking, you kind of just jump back up. I think even if you have a broken leg, you still just jump back up and you try to get going again before you realize, wait a second, something's not right here. So I got back up, grabbed my bike, jumped back on, and immediately I could feel there was like no resistance on the chain. And the derailleur had bent into the spokes of the bike. So the bike was no longer rideable, unfortunately. I tried to bend it right, but I could see that it was just not going to work anymore. And there's no ways I would have made it around another lap with that. And then once I realized the bike was broken, then I started to assess my body, and I realized, oh, shit, it looks like I've hurt myself as well here. And mostly it was just my ribs and my hip that I landed on. And I've actually never hurt my ribs before, and it's still we now like 5 weeks since the race, and I'm still struggling with it. It's a lot better this week, and it's made like some good improvement over the last few days, which is finally a bit of a relief because I still want to do one more race this year. But yeah, unfortunately, the reason I stopped racing was that the bike was no longer rideable, and yeah, kind of ended my day there.
Yeah, that's a bit of the dangerous side of XTERRA racing.
Well, it's actually the first time I've broken my bike in an XTERRA that I can't continue. So,
but also your first crash, or did you have more crashes, or were the not just like the major ones
in that race?
No, just generally speaking.
No, I've definitely crashed before, but just that was definitely. It was probably, one of the lowest speed crashes that I've had, but sometimes those are the ones that cause the most damage. And I think the bike, I think also like spun awkwardly as I fell, and then it just hit the rock like on the perfectly wrong place. So, because I was riding on the new SRAM XX group set, which is supposed to be like unbreakable, but I managed to break it anyway.
You proved them wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually really, really sorry to see you crash, but I was thinking that you would like catch up and then get back into the race.
I would have seen how I would have gone on the second lap. Maybe I would have gotten myself, because as I say, I think we were only like 40 seconds or a minute back, because I went to look at the last timing split, and I think it was within a minute still.
It was not far, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it was not far at all. And then Jens rode himself up to third, I think, coming off the bike. So yeah, don't know what would have been possible, but it would have been nice to at least just finish. And actually, as I say, like started to physically feel a bit better. I was really under pressure in the beginning of the bike. I was like, oh, fuck, this is not going to go well, especially how aggressive they took the start of the climb. But I think that was just Arthur and Felix getting back to the front. And once they got to the front, it settled down a bit, and that gap kind of stayed at like 30 or 40 seconds for quite a while. And then it went out a little bit more, but we pulled time back on them on the technical side of things. And they were also riding on a hardtail. So I think being on a dual suspension helped me on the descents, cost me a bit on the climbs. And I think if I went back to that race, I would also do the same and invest in some lighter material. But in the end, it was mostly just to do a race for, obviously I wanted to do well, but it was also for the enjoyment of being back in XTERRA and doing something that I enjoy.
Yeah, I think Jens Emil rode a hardtail with a seat post dropper. That was probably like the best call.
I like that setup. I think that's a good call. Yeah.
But yeah, let's hope you maybe get another chance for Molveno next year. So hopefully those two dates match quite nicely. So I'd be stoked to see you back in Molveno. How do you like the location overall?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Like really, really cool place to have the XTERRA World Championships, and makes for some very, very good Instagram posts, that's for sure. But no, I really enjoyed going to somewhere new in Italy, and hopefully one day we'll get back there. I'm not sure how many more years XTERRA World Champs is planning to be there, but sounds like definitely one
more year.
Yeah.
Nice. So thank you so much for your time, Brad. And I think you have one more race planned this season. Where are you heading out?
Yeah, I got one more race for the year. It's the Ironman 70.3 South African Championships in Muscle Bay. Been a rough few weeks since XTERRA with my ribs and a few other curveballs. So we'll see if I manage to get there. But yeah, I would like to do one more race for the year before shutting it down for the holidays and beginning to prepare for 2024.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, and hope your recovery and training goes well. And yeah, we all hope to see you on the top spot. That would be obviously the best call. But yeah, best of luck for the rest of your season then. And yeah, it was very nice to chat to you. I think we've gotten on a very interesting athlete that has so many strengths. And yeah, all the best, and hope to see you around sometime soon again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully we get to race each other soon, maybe on the road or in XTERRA. XTERRA South Africa is in February. Maybe you need to come out for some summer training and get your first race of the season in.
Yeah, would be a quite nice idea. So I'll let you know. Well, it was nice to talk to you, and all the best, Brad.
Take it easy. Ciao. Bye.
Dear listener, it's wonderful that you have stayed with us until the end of the episode with Bradley Weiss. You're making all the right choices today. To make the absolute right one, consider signing up for the OMNi-BiOTiC Klartext Triathlon 2024. Otherwise, you would miss out on one of the best triathlon events on the race calendar. We also appreciate donations via PayPal at irswim@web.de, positive reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more, as well as your feedback. Thank you and keep enjoying the listening experience. Alex.